Name is Tyler Cantrell. I've had bad crowds before. Drunk crowds, silent crowds, crowds where a guy named Randy keeps yelling Freebird during a stand-up set like that somehow applies to comedy. But the night the world ended, that crowd tried to eat me. So yeah, technically, my worst show. The club was called the Laughing Barrel, a brick basement comedy bar wedged between a tattoo shop and a pawn store downstairs. Low ceilings, sticky floors, beer that tasted like regret. But it paid. And when you're a stand-up comedian whose career highlight is opening for a ventriloquist who lost half his audience to the bathroom line, you take the gigs you can get. I was 20 minutes into my set. The crowd was actually good. Real good. I was working a bit about dating apps. Dating apps are weird, I said into the mic, because you're basically judging someone's entire personality based on 5 photos and a sentence like, "I love adventures and tacos." A woman from the back yelled, "What's wrong with tacos?" "Nothing," I said, "but if tacos are your personality, you're one margarita away from joining a cult." Laughter. Good laughter. The kind comedians live for. Then someone screamed upstairs. Not a heckle, a scream. Everyone in the room paused. The bartender looked toward the stairwell. Another scream. Then crashing. Then something that sounded like furniture going down a flight of stairs. Someone laughed nervously. Probably just someone realizing their tab, I said. More nervous laughter. Then the door at the top of the stairwell burst open. A man fell down the stairs. Not stumbled. Fell. He rolled down the steps like a rag doll and slammed into the bottom railing. Blood covered his face. Half his cheek was gone. The room went silent. The bartender whispered, "Holy hell." The man stood, slowly. Wrong. He swayed like a puppet on broken strings. Then he looked up at us and growled. Now look, I'm a comedian. I'm not trained for crisis situations. But when a guy whose face looks like it lost a fight with a wood chipper starts growling at you, you get pretty strong feeling the night's not going to end well. Someone said the word zombie. Everyone laughed, because of course they did. Then the guy lunged. He tackled a college kid near the stairs and bit into his neck like a starving dog. Blood sprayed across the wall. The room exploded into chaos. Chairs overturned. People screamed. Someone puked. And I stood there holding a microphone thinking, well, this is new material. The bartender grabbed a bat from under the bar. "Get out," he screamed. That's when 3 more infected came crashing down the stairs. I dropped the mic. No punchline, just survival instinct. People rushed towards the back exit. I got pushed into the crowd like a sardine in a panic can. Someone yelled, "They're everywhere upstairs." Great. Fantastic. Nothing like zombies to ruin open mic night. A woman tripped beside me. One of the infected lunged towards her. I grabbed a bar stool and swung it like Babe Ruth having a mental breakdown. The stool smashed into the thing's skull. It went down for about 2 seconds. Then it started moving again. "Oh, good," I muttered. "They're the get back up kind." Someone kicked open the kitchen door. The crowd poured through. I followed. Grease smell, hot metal, burning oil. A cook stood frozen, holding a spatula. "What the hell is happening?" he asked. "New diet trend," I said. "People are eating each other now." We ran through the back door into the alley. Sirens wailed across the city. Gunshots echoed in the distance, and people were running everywhere. Some of them bleeding, some of them chasing. You know that moment when you realize something on the news isn't exaggerated? Yeah, that moment hit like a truck. The outbreak wasn't somewhere else. It was right here, right now, and downtown was turning into a buffet. I ran. No destination, just away. The streets were chaos. Cars crashed into each other. People slammed into storefronts trying to get inside. Some doors opened, some didn't. Those who didn't last long. A police cruiser flew past with lights flashing. Then it slammed into a parked bus. 2 infected pulled the officer through the broken window. I kept running, because here's the thing about survival instincts. You don't think, you just move. I ducked into the sporting goods store, locked the door. 5 other people were inside. A construction worker, a teenager, a woman holding a baseball bat, and a guy wearing a business suit who looked like he had just watched his retirement plan get eaten. Everyone stared at each other. Finally, the teenager asked, "What do we do?" The room went quiet. All eyes turned toward me. Why? Because I'd been the one talking confidently 10 minutes earlier. Because apparently, if you hold a microphone, people assume you know things. So I said the only thing that came to mind: we leave the city. The construction worker shook his head. Highways will be jammed. Then we don't take highways. The woman with the bat asked, where do we go? That's when I thought about the marina. I'd done a corporate gig there once. Rich guys, huge boats, security gates and fuel docks, ocean access, and most importantly, water. Zombies are many things: fast, angry, gross, but historically, they're not great sailors. So I said, we steal a boat. The businessman blinked. That's your plan? Look, I said, I'm a comedian. The fact that I have any plan at all is impressive. There was silence. Then the construction worker nodded. Better than waiting here. And just like that, we had a terrible plan. We moved fast. Side streets, alleys, avoiding main roads. The city was falling apart. Stores burned. Helicopters roared overhead. Gunfire echoed everywhere. Once we saw a group of infected tear a man apart in the middle of the street. The teenager threw up. The businessman started crying quietly. I tried not to look. Humor helps, but some things you don't joke about. About 20 blocks from the marina, we hit our first real problem. A crowd of infected poured out of a subway entrance, at least 20 of them, rotting, screaming, and hungry. The construction worker whispered, run. We ran. And that's the moment I discovered two things. One, fear is excellent cardio, and two, zombies do not respect personal space. We lost 2 people getting to the waterfront. The businessman got grabbed when he tripped. The construction worker tried to help him. That didn't end well either. The woman with the bat and the teenager kept running with me. The marina gates were ahead, locked, naturally, because nothing about tonight could be easy. The teenager climbed the fence first, then the woman, then me. Behind us, the infected slammed into the gate, hands grabbing through the bars, teeth snapping. We dropped down inside the marina, and for the first time since the comedy show, there was silence. Rows of boats rocked in the water, million-dollar yachts, sailboats, fishing boats, floating escape pods. The teenager asked, do you know how to drive one? I shrugged. How hard can it be? We searched 3 boats. All 3 were locked. Of course they were, because rich people love security. Then we reached the big one, a massive white yacht, probably 70 feet long, luxury floating mansion. At the boarding hatch was a rubber welcome mat, and under it, you guessed it, the keys. I stared at them, then laughed. You've got to be kidding me, the woman said. What? I held them up. Rich people are idiots. The engine roared to life, a beautiful sound, music to my traumatized ears. The teenager untied the dock lines. Zombies were pouring into the marina now, climbing fences, falling into the water, running along the docks. One grabbed my ankle as I stepped aboard. I kicked it in the face. Sorry, buddy, tonight's show is canceled. The yacht drifted away from the dock, engines pushing us into the harbor. Dozens of infected stumbled off the pier trying to reach us. Most fell into the water. A few just stood there screaming. The city burned behind us, sirens and smoke, helicopters falling out of the sky, and the first stars of night rising above the chaos. The teenager whispered, are we safe? I looked out over the dark ocean, then back at the collapsing city, then down at the microphone I'd somehow carried the entire time, and I said the only honest answer, I have absolutely no idea. But one thing was certain. My life as a comedian had just changed, because if the world really ended tonight, then tomorrow my audience wouldn't be drunk bar crowds. It would be the end of humanity. And honestly, given the way the last crowd behaved, that might be an actual improvement. My name is Tyler Cantrell, stand-up comedian, yacht thief, zombie apocalypse survivor, and this was the last set of my career. The ocean at night is supposed to be peaceful. At least that's what every travel commercial says. Calm water, moonlight, soft waves against the hull. But those commercials never mention the part where the entire world might be collapsing behind you. We were maybe a mile off the harbor when the city lights started flickering out, 1 block at a time. Darkness spreading through the skyline. Smoke drifted upward like the city itself was dying. The teenager stood beside me on the bridge, staring back. "What do you think happened?" he asked. I leaned against the wheel. "Well," I said, "either there's a massive national emergency," I gestured toward the burning city, "or everyone simultaneously decided to try bath salts." He didn't laugh. Fair enough. Comedy hits different when zombies are involved. The woman with the bats sat on the leather couch in the cabin below. She hadn't said a word in almost 20 minutes. Shock? People go quiet when their world breaks. I went down the steps. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Name's Rachel." "Tyler." "Comedian Tyler?" I blinked. "You were at the show?" She gave a tired smile. "Yeah." "Well," I sighed, "sorry you didn't get the full set. I had a great closer about airline food." She actually laughed, and that tiny laugh felt like oxygen in a room full of smoke. Turns out yacht owners prepare pretty well for disaster. The galley was stacked. Wine, steaks, canned food, enough bottled water to fill a kiddie pool. Rachel opened a cabinet. "Do you think this belongs to someone?" "Technically, yes," I said. "Morally?" I shrugged. "Look, if the owner comes looking for it, we'll apologize and give the boat back. Assuming he's not currently eating someone's liver." The teenager walked in. "Found the bedrooms." "Plural?" "3 of them." I raised my eyebrows. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the world's most expensive lifeboat." He introduced himself. Evan, 16, high school kid. Probably had plans tonight that didn't involve a zombie apocalypse. Life has a way of changing schedules. Morning came slow. Gray sky, cold wind, the ocean stretching forever. For the first time since the outbreak, no screaming, no sirens, no gunfire, just waves. It almost felt normal. Then something floated past the boat. A body, face down. Rachel saw it. Her expression hardened. "So they float?" "Apparently," Evan whispered. "Does that mean the infected can swim?" I thought about it. Let's hope they skip swimming lessons. We kept moving south along the coast, far enough to stay out of sight of land, close enough we could reach shore if needed. I had no idea what I was doing with the boat, but I had watched a lot of YouTube, which is basically the same thing. That night we heard it, a knocking sound, thunk, 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 coming from the hull. Rachel froze. "You hear that?" "Yeah." Evan leaned over the railing with a flashlight and immediately jumped back. "Oh God," he said. I looked down. 3 infected were clinging to the swim ladder, half submerged, gray faces, dead eyes, reaching upward. Apparently zombies do float, and when they float, they drift. And when they drift, sometimes they bump into boats. Fantastic. Rachel grabbed a boat hook. "Help me." We pushed them away one by one. They splashed into the dark water, drifting back into the night. Evan swallowed hard. "So?" "Yeah," I said. "Rule number 1 of the ocean apocalypse." "What's that?" "Even the water isn't safe." 3 days later, we discovered our next problem. Fuel gauge. Almost empty. Apparently 70-foot yachts drink diesel like a frat house drinks cheap beer. We need fuel, which meant one thing: land. Rachel pointed at a small harbor town on the map. "We could try here. Population maybe 5,000. It has a fishing dock and a fuel station. If the outbreak hit late, maybe it wasn't completely overrun." I sighed. "All right, new comedy tour stop." We pulled in at dawn. Fog rolled across the water. The docks were silent. Boats drifted loose from their lines. A fishing net floated half submerged. The town itself looked abandoned. That's never a good sign. I grabbed a flare gun from the yacht safety locker. Rachel took a hatchet. Evan carried a metal pipe. "Stay close," I said. "Always have. Rule of survival. Never split the party. Every horror movie ever made agrees with that." The town grocery store was half destroyed, windows smashed, shelves empty. We still found supplies: canned beans, rice, energy bars, and the holy grail of apocalypse survival, toilet paper. Rachel held up a package. "People died for this." I nodded. To be fair, that's also true during Black Friday. Evan actually smiled. Dark humor. It keeps the panic away. Until the noise started. Growling. From the back of the store. 3 infected stumbled through the stockroom door. Rachel swung the hatchet. One down. Evan smashed the second with a pipe. The third lunged at me. I fired the flare gun. Direct hit to the chest. The thing burst into flames. It staggered through the aisles, burning like a demonic birthday candle. Rachel stared at me. You just set a zombie on fire in a grocery store. Look, I said. Improvisation is a key skill in comedy. We were loading supplies onto the dock cart when a voice called out, "Drop those bags." 3 men stood at the end of the pier, rifles, dirty clothes, hard eyes. Raiders. One of them looked at the yacht. Well, now, that's a nice boat. Great. First pirates of the apocalypse. I raised my hands. Guys, listen. We're just passing through. The man with the rifle smiled. Not anymore, you're not. Rachel whispered, Tyler. I slowly lifted the flare gun again. Let me try something. Then I shouted, Hey! Every infected in the harbor turned toward the noise and started running. The raiders looked behind them. I fired the flare gun again, straight into a bait barrel. Fish exploded everywhere. The smell filled the dock. The zombies charged, and the raiders ran. So did we. We cast off in record time, engines roaring, fuel tanks finally full. Behind us, the dock disappeared into chaos. Evan collapsed onto the deck laughing. That was insane. Rachel shook her head. You're crazy. I leaned on the railing. Crazy? Maybe. But I've performed at bachelor parties. This rarely cracks the top 10. I've performed at bachelor parties. This barely cracks the top 10. Weeks passed. We learned the rhythms of survival. Fishing lines, rain collectors, night watches, radio scanning. The world stayed silent. Cities burned along the coast. Ships drifted empty. But we stayed alive. One night, Rachel sat beside me on the deck watching the stars. You ever think about what happens next? All the time. And I looked out over the endless ocean. Well, I always wanted a bigger audience. She smirked. Yeah? I nodded. If the world ever comes back, I'm going to have the greatest stand-up material in human history. Evan laughed from the bow. You're really going to make jokes about the apocalypse. I grinned. Kid, comedy is just tragedy with better timing. Somewhere beyond the horizon, there still might be survivors, maybe islands, maybe safe zones, maybe the last city standing. We didn't know. We had a boat, food, and fuel. And we also had each other, which in the apocalypse is basically winning the lottery. I leaned against the railing as the yacht cut through the moonlit water, and for the first time since the outbreak, I started writing new material. Because someday, if humanity survives this mess, someone's going to need to explain what happened, and who better than a comedian who survived the worst crowd in history? My name is Tyler Cantrell, stand-up comedian, accidental pirate, zombie apocalypse survivor, and if the dead ever learn how to swim properly, I might finally bomb on stage again. 2 days after the world ended, the radio finally talked back. Up until that moment, the Marine band had been nothing but static and ghost noises. You'd hear fragments sometimes, military chatter, emergency codes, someone screaming, then silence again. But that morning, while I was half asleep on the bridge, the speaker crackled. A voice came through. Any survivors along the eastern seaboard respond. Repeat, any survivors. I nearly fell out of my chair. Rachel! She came up the ladder instantly. What? I pointed at the radio. The voice came again, transmitting from Harbor 9, Island Safe Zone. Survivors welcome. Evan leaned in. Did they say safe zone? The voice faded. Static swallowed it, then silence. I looked at the navigation chart. There were hundreds of islands along the coast, but only one labeled Harbor 9, a small island about 40 miles south. Rachel crossed her arms. Could be a trap. Could be, I said. Could be pirates. Also possible, I said. Evan looked between us. Or it could be survivors. The three of us stood there thinking the same thing. After a month at sea, even a bad plan starts to look like a good one. The island appeared around noon. Rocky shoreline, tall pine trees, a narrow harbor tucked into the cliffs, and something I hadn't seen in weeks. Smoke from chimneys. Rachel whispered, Well, that's promising. As we got closer, we saw boats, fishing boats, small boats, a couple other yachts. People stood on the dock watching us approach, armed, but not hostile, just cautious. Which, honestly, was the most comforting thing I'd seen since the apocalypse. A man stepped forward as we tied off, late 40s, gray beard, shotgun slung over his shoulder. You the ones broadcasting? I asked. He nodded. I'm Caleb. Tyler. We shook hands. Welcome to Harbor 9. Turns out about 60 survivors had gathered on the island. Fishermen, locals, a few people who escaped from nearby cities. They had cabins, generators, rainwater collectors, and most importantly, rules. Rule number 1, no one enters without being checked for bites. Rule number 2, everyone works. Rule number 3, no one brings trouble back to the island. Caleb showed us around. Fishing racks, smokehouses, gardens growing in old boat containers. It wasn't paradise, but it was alive. That night, the community gathered around a fire pit. Some handed me a plate of fish. I hadn't eaten fresh food in weeks. I almost cried. Rachel elbowed me. You okay? Yeah. I took a bite. Best restaurant review I've given all year. A few nights later, Caleb asked me something strange. Rachel says you're a comedian. Well, formerly I was. He nodded toward the fire pit. People could use a laugh. I stared at him. You want me to do stand-up comedy in the apocalypse? Exactly. I walked out to the fire. 60 survivors sat watching me. Some exhausted, some scarred, some just numb. I cleared my throat. All right, so how's everyone enjoying the end of civilization? That got a few chuckles. Encouraging. I gotta say, dating apps are way simpler now. If someone tries to bite you, they're probably not marriage material. Laughter spread through the crowd. Real laughter. And for 10 minutes, the apocalypse had paused. 2 weeks later, we saw another boat. It approached after sunset. Fast. Too fast. No lights. Caleb spotted it first. Raiders, he said. Everyone grabbed weapons. The boat slammed into the dock. 6 men jumped out, armed, dirty, and hungry. One shouted, "We're taking your supplies." Classic pirate introduction. Rachel whispered, "Tyler." "I'm working on it," I said. I grabbed the marina loudspeaker and yelled into it. "Attention raiders." They froze. I continued. "You have arrived at Harbor 9, home of 60 heavily armed survivors, most of whom have serious anger issues. I paused. You have 30 seconds to leave before tonight's entertainment becomes live target practice. The raiders hesitated. One fired a warning shot. Big mistake. 60 rifles answered. The raiders ran back to their boat and disappeared into the dark. Evan laughed beside me. "Did you just scare off pirates with a comedy routine?" I shrugged. Timing is everything. Life settled into a rhythm. Fishing, repairing boats, night watches, but the infected still drifted ashore sometimes. Bodies carried by currents. Every few days, someone would spot one stumbling along the rocks. We called it shore duty. One afternoon, Evan and I were on patrol when we saw something strange. Footprints. Fresh. Human. Leading into the woods. I frowned. Those aren't ours. We followed them carefully, and that's when we heard the crying. A little girl sat behind a fallen tree, maybe 8 years old, covered in dirt, alone. Evan whispered, "Oh, man." I crouched down. "Hey, kid." She looked up. "Are you zombies?" she asked. "Not today." Her name was Lily. Her family boat had crashed during a storm. She survived, and they did not. Rachel stayed with her that night. The entire settlement shifted around that little girl. Something about children surviving the end of the world. It reminds people why they're fighting. But 3 days later, Caleb found something. A small sailboat drifting near the island. Inside were bodies, fresh, not infected, killed. Rachel stared at the wounds. "Raiders," she said. And suddenly Harbor 9 didn't feel as safe anymore. They came before dawn. 3 boats, 20 men, guns blazing. The alarm bell rang across the harbor. Everyone grabbed weapons. The first raider boat hit the dock. Rachel dropped the first attacker with a rifle shot. Evan swung a fire axe like a man possessed. I grabbed the loudspeaker again. "Welcome back, everybody. Tonight's show is Get Off My Island." Gunfire echoed across the harbor. The battle lasted 15 brutal minutes, but Harbor 9 held. The raiders fled again, leaving their dead behind. The settlement gathered that night, silent, exhausted. Caleb looked at the horizon. "They'll come back." Rachel nodded. They always do. I stared out over the water, thinking. Then I said something that surprised even me. We take the fight to them. Everyone looked at me, the comedian suggesting war. I shrugged. Look, if there's one thing stand-up teaches you, it's never let the heckler control the show. The yacht was fueled, armed, and ready. Rachel stood beside me on the bridge. You sure about this? Nope. Evan grinned. But it's a good story. I looked back at Harbor 9, at the survivors, at the little girl who finally had a place to sleep, and then I turned the wheel towards open ocean. All right, I said, let's go ruin some pirates' day. Because if the apocalypse had taught me anything, it's that survival is only the first act. What you do next, that's the real show. The ocean was quiet again, which meant something bad was coming. There had been a pattern. 3 days after the attack on Harbor 9, we set out. 3 of us, me, Rachel, and Evan, and the 70-foot yacht that technically belonged to some rich guy who was probably now part of the seafood chain. The plan was simple. Find the raiders, destroy their boats, make sure they never come back to Harbor 9. Rachel leaned over the radar screen. You realize this is insane. Absolutely, I said, but insane plans seem to be our specialty. Evan grinned. And we've got the biggest boat. True. And the loudest comedian. Also true. We found the first sign of them 2 days later. A wrecked trawler, burned, half submerged. There were bodies on the deck. Rachel climbed aboard carefully. Execution style, she whispered. Evan asked, Raiders again? I said it looked like it. Inside the wheelhouse, we found a map. Routes marked along the coast, small towns circled, supply runs, ambush points, and one location circled 3 times. A harbor about 50 miles south. Rachel tapped the map. Their base. I nodded. Well, guess we found tonight's show. We approached the harbor after midnight. Engines low, lights off. Through binoculars we could see it clearly. 3 large fishing boats, 2 speedboats, dock lights. Generators were running, and armed guards. Rachel counted, maybe 30 of them. Evan whistled softly. That's a lot. I rubbed my chin. Yeah, but they're pirates, and pirates are terrible at security. Rachel raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Because every pirate movie ever made ends with them getting outsmarted. She sighed. Your strategy is based on movies. Hey, so far the apocalypse has mostly followed movie logic. Step 1, we'll cut the power. Step 2, we'll destroy their boats. Step 3, we'll leave before they realized what happened. Simple. Rachel and Evan took the inflatable dinghy. I stayed on the yacht. Watching through night vision binoculars, I saw them slip into the harbor like ghosts. 5 minutes later, the lights went out. The harbor plunged into complete darkness. Shouting erupted. Confusion. Now, Rachel's voice crackled on the radio. Now. I fired the flare launcher. 3 flares streaked into the harbor, lighting everything bright red. Then Rachel tossed fuel cans onto the nearest boat. Evan lit them. Boom. The first boat exploded into flames. Pirates ran everywhere. Gunfire erupted. I opened the yacht's throttle, engines roaring. The war had started. Chaos spread across the water. One pirate boat tried to chase the dinghy. I rammed it with the yacht. 70 feet of fiberglass beats a speedboat every time. The impact flipped them sideways. Rachel and Evan climbed aboard again as bullets sparked across the hull. Drive, Rachel yelled. Oh, I am. I swung the yacht around, straight towards the biggest pirate vessel. Tyler, what are you doing? Improvising. We slammed into their dock. Rachel fired a shotgun across the pier. Pirates scattered. Fuel drums ignited. The harbor turned into an inferno. 3 pirate boats burned. 1 sank. The last tried to escape. Evan grabbed the flare gun. Mind if I? Be my guest. He fired. The flare smashed into the engine housing. Flames erupted instantly. The boat drifted into the burning docks. Rachel looked around. Time to go. I didn't argue. We powered out of the harbor at full speed. Behind us, the pirate base looked like a lighthouse of bad decisions. We were 10 miles offshore when the radar beeped. Movement behind us. Rachel looked through binoculars. You've got to be kidding me. The burning harbor had attracted something. Bodies. Dozens of them. Floating infected, drifting in the current. Pulled by the flames and noise. The ocean behind us churned with gray hands reaching upward. Evan swallowed. That's a lot of zombies. Technically, I said, they're swimmers now. Not helping. We pushed the engines harder, leaving the floating dead behind us. When Harbor 9 came into view the next morning, the entire settlement gathered on the dock. Caleb watched us approach. Did you find them? I tied off the line. Yep. And, Rachel smiled slightly, they won't be bothering anyone again. Evan added, we may have accidentally burned down their entire harbor. Caleb blinked. Accidentally? I shrugged. Comedy is about escalation. That night we celebrated. Fresh fish, firelight, people laughing again. But late that evening the radio crackled. A military transmission. Weak but clear. All survivors. Warning. Infection has spread inland. Major cities lost. Evacuation zones are collapsing. Static followed. Then one final sentence. The dead are migrating. Rachel stared at the radio. Migrating where? I looked out towards the dark ocean, where hundreds of coastal cities now stood abandoned. Probably here. A week later, she saw the first one, a single infected drifting onto the rocks, then another, then 10. The currents were bringing them, from the mainland, an endless tide of the dead. Caleb stood beside me, watching the shoreline. This could get bad, I nodded. Yeah. But look on the bright side. What bright side? I grinned. Well, if the apocalypse keeps escalating like this, I'm eventually going to have the greatest closing set in comedy history. Rachel shook her head. You're impossible. Evan laughed, and the waves kept bringing the dead, which meant the next act was going to be a big one.